My name is James H. Danley, and I was a poll challenger at the TCF Center on Tuesday 11/3 and Wednesday 11/4. I've signed and submitted a 13-page affidavit to those items which I witnessed personally. The following are only a few of the most egregious items witnessed. I was not allowed to perform my job, and from what I observed, were any of the GOP challengers in accordance with Michigan laws. We were constantly prevented from getting close enough to see what was going on with respect to the ballots. Procedures were not being properly followed. When we brought these to the attention of the supervisors, our concerns were dismissed and ignored. We observed ballots being backdated from 11/4 to 11/2 and data being entered into the computers for these mail-in ballots. Poll workers were entering ballot information from new mail-in ballots, including dates of birth of 1/1/1900, and processing those ballots for tabulation. Dead people were voting. I sent a website to that effect, and the list that they had up to that date was 17,327 randomly checked Michigan voters that were registered for voting and were above the age of 80. Every name on this list has voted in the 2020 election and has also been found in one or more of the obituaries online. This is the most important election in my lifetime, and I think the most important election in the history of our republic. Every legislator, whether seated in the House or the Senate, whether Democrat or Republican, took an oath to defend the U.S. and state constitutions against enemies both foreign and domestic. Time is of the essence, and now is the time to fulfill that oath.
I worked at a precinct 205 at Mason Elementary School in Detroit, and then I also worked at the TCF Center as a poll challenger. When you go to vote in person and you're feeding your ballot into a tabulator box, if there's an error, it comes right back out at you. You see the screen, you have an option to either correct your ballot or resubmit it as is. So then it goes into the locked box. It is never opened until the end of the day after polls close at 8 p.m. And then it is opened up, processed, put into sealed envelopes, and so forth. So the high-speed tabulators that were at the TCF Center looked more like a printer. They were fed 50 ballots at a time, sometimes in stacks of up to like 200. They were each, individually rubber band at 50 at a time was the way we were taught, that's directed to do. And they just came out the back. They were in a bin there, an open bin. So they could grab them all and refeed them. So I don't know if, you all had a clear picture of that.
I am a resident of Oakland County. I live in Milford. Been here all my life, not necessarily in Milford. I grew up in Detroit. I was a Republican poll challenger both on Tuesday and Wednesday. On Tuesday, things went pretty well. When I was called back in early on Wednesday morning, I came back into the room. I could not believe how many more people were there, the tension in the room. And where did all these ballots come from? When I'd left on Tuesday, most of the tables had been complete. The table I was overseeing at the time still had about 200 ballots left, but it certainly didn't look like there was going to even be enough for a night shift. I was very surprised to see the level of activity on the following morning. As you've already heard from many people who had my positions, there was a lot of intimidation and hostility vented toward the Republican challengers. I experienced a lot of that as well. We know rules were broken because there were very, very few. I count less than 5 Republican poll workers in the room. There's supposed to be 1 at every counting table, at least, and there wasn't. By midday on Wednesday, there were no more Republicans allowed into the room. There was a lot of intimidation around those who were in the room, particularly the men and the lawyers, and they were hauled out forcibly by the police for really no good reason, while the whole room of workers cheered. This is intimidating. They stood and they cheered repeatedly as Republicans were hauled out for doing their job. This is wrong. I personally was the victim of 2 different accounts of intimidation, one by workers, supervisors included, and one by Republican poll challengers or watchers. In both cases, I had raised my hand to challenge a ballot. In one case, the ballot was being duplicated. I was being prevented from watching because only 2 workers were doing it, and they were shoulder to shoulder. I'd moved into about 3 feet or so behind them so I could look over their shoulders. The supervisor came over and told me I had to get at least 6 feet away. I told her that by the rules, election rules, I could move in during the time that I was watching the ballot while it was being duplicated.
1 minute left.
She was yelling at me, and that ballot ended up being duplicated in error. We got a high enough supervisor to stop that. The second time I was surrounded by Democrat challengers who, again, were yelling at me, calling me a racist, telling me my mother didn't love me, all kinds of, stupid but meant to intimidate things. This is wrong.
I was a poll challenger at TCF Center. I worked 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. I saw a few things, and I tried to make several statements to several different organizations, and I had nobody really follow up with me. A few things that I saw, right off the bat, I saw table supervisors distinguished with the emblem on the chest, wearing political statements. Saw Black Lives Matter on masks. I saw T-shirts, undershirts wearing Black Lives Matter. The table I worked at, I saw several ballots that I challenged. One, when the computer popped up a little box that said duplicate ballot already processed. I challenged that. I saw a ballot that was opened up that was completely blank, front and back. At the end of the night, I asked my table supervisor if our numbers matched and if it reconciled. She said it did. And then she told me, we decided to take the ballots that were challenged, the provisional ballots, and they will be tabulated. She told me the tabulator ultimately uncovers errors with ballots, that they would be spoiled by the tabulator. And I thought that was interesting. And I asked her again, and she assured me that tabulator would correct the error. And that's interesting because when I gave that statement over the phone, that was never put in my affidavit. And I have yet to make an affidavit because I tried to give it to a couple of people and nobody's followed up with me, or if they followed up with me, it was inaccurate information. And to me, that's a big deal. I also saw the ballots being dropped off about 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. I was actually standing next to the lead attorney, and we were all talking about why are these ballots showing up as late as they did. I thought that was interesting.
I am an unaffiliated Michigan voter who was trained by the GOP to be a poll challenger on Wednesday, November 4th, beginning in the late morning until around 8 p.m. because I was told that they needed help. They were understaffed. I witnessed the room erupt in thunderous applause and derogatory cheering as Republican poll workers were picked off one by one and ejected from the room repeatedly by police escort throughout the day. By the end of the day, they had picked off so many GOP poll workers that there were probably only a few dozen left to monitor all of the processing stations in the room, which I'm told was between 130 and 160. Because of this, I had to move between several tables. One was processing a stack of roughly 35 ballots with pink challenge stickers on them. Many other tables also had similar stacks on them as well. None of the ballots appeared to be in the poll database, so the poll workers were simply entering 1/1/1900 as the birth dates and entering the addresses and names that no one seemed to be verifying and which I could not see to verify. When I would politely try to check such things, as had been the case throughout the entire day, I was told that I wasn't allowed within 6 feet of the tables even to verify ballots, and told that I was trying to kill people. I watched as the table simply passed in mismatched ballots and envelopes through the checking station. When I challenged it, and subsequent ballots that weren't in the poll book, the table supervisor laughed and said, "You can't do that." And several other operatives gave me the COVID runaround as I had gotten throughout the day, all trying to intimidate me and prevent me from doing my job, claiming that I was endangering their workers, trying to kill their people, and even holding a pen in a threatening way. Yet, when non-GOP operatives would stand near the tables and harass me, no one would give them any problem at all. These people were like professional agitators whose job it was to sow discord among GOP workers who were trying to do their job and then get them kicked out. At some point, a GOP lawyer was brought in and confirmed that I was properly performing my duties. Instead of backing down, the table supervisor's supervisor and his supervisor and all the damn supervisors came up and they started arguing with the lawyer, telling him he didn't know what the law was.
1 minute.
In the meantime, the ballots continued to go through, so I stepped up to the table to inspect the next ballot briefly. The manager separated me from the table, wielding COVID as a weapon one more time, and walking towards me, forcing me to step further away. He said something to the effect of, "I will kick your ass or I will kick you out of here." And I said, and I looked at him and I quizzically, and I said, "Are you threatening me?" He repeated the mantra more than once as he began to wave down a police officer. I raised my voice so that others could hear what was going on. And at this point, and I said, "Are you threatening me?" And at this point, the police officer arrived, and I did not ask any questions, and I was removed from the room without any due process.
My name's Andrew Miller. I was a poll worker on Tuesday and Wednesday. I am also an engineer, so let's get to some of that. Every computer on Tuesday morning had an error code in the right-hand corner that says update was overdue. It was flashing on every single computer I looked at. I looked at least 20 of them. Also, about a third of the computers had the wrong time. At 10 a.m. in the morning, about a third of the computers said 2:59 p.m. I don't know how they keep track of when things are occurring when the time on the computer is not even correct. On Wednesday, I walked up to a table and one of the computer operators was logging in, and she logged in as an admin. So she had full authority to do anything she wanted into that system. Did everybody in that facility use the admin in order to log into the computers? I also saw the routers with high amount of transferring and work when there was nobody even monitoring the copy machines that were collecting the ballots. Nobody was at the computers, but there was a lot of data going across those. I also was harassed by a number of people. There was a table worker, then there was a Democrat worker, then there was me. And the table worker said that I needed to back up because I was too close and I did not have the 6-foot distance. But there was a person between her and myself that was a Democrat challenger. A lot of this could go away if you had one Republican at each table. I applied to be a worker. You've heard here multiple people applied to be workers, and we are all denied that.
My name is Bob Cushman. I'm a registered voter in Lyon Township, and I desire to testify concerning events in Detroit on November 4th, the day after the election. I believe that I witnessed evidence of mass election fraud on the morning of November 4th and the evening of November 4th, but I'm only going to talk about the morning right now. While I served as a trained and credentialed election challenger at the Detroit Absent Voter County Boards, TCF Center, Detroit. I arrived in the counting boards at approximately 6:30 a.m. after being briefed in room 260. We'd been advised of a very large ballot drop, approximately in the vicinity of 4 a.m. Night shift observers had indicated that about 61 boxes had been delivered. I began observing the process of ballots at several counting boards. I quickly noticed that none, and I mean none, of the names were being scanned from the ballots were in the electronic poll books. All of the names that were found in the supplemental sheets. We know that the poll books, the electronic poll books, were updated on Sunday, November 1st. That meant that all of these new ballots had to have been brand new registered voters on Monday, November 2nd, or Tuesday, November 3rd. I found it very hard to believe that tens of thousands of people had registered in just 2 short days. So I began writing down the names on the ballots immediately after they were scanned by the computer poll worker. As soon as I began, I was severely obstructed by 5 different persons that I could no longer continue my legal responsibility as a poll challenger. These 5 persons comprised of a poll worker, a supervisor, an uncredentialed person, a Democrat challenger, and one of the top leaders of the AVCB. The details can be found in my affidavit. Does anyone believe that 30 or 40,000 new voters were actually signed up legally in 2 days? I implore every member of this board to protect the Constitution. I implore you to give us a full forensic audit.